From the Oklahoman newsroom, it's time for Thunder Thursday. It's our trade deadline edition. They just planned the trade deadline around Thunder Thursday, guys. Made it easy on us. I'm Jenny Carlson here in studio with fellow columnist Barry Trammell, Thunder beat writer Brett Dawson. Guys, even though trade deadline, a lot going on around the league, nothing right now happening for the Thunder. Brett, at this point, no moves at the trade deadline. Probably a surprise for most people. Are you surprised no moves?
A little bit surprised, just because it's been Sam Presti's MO. I mean, that's what he's typically done. He's made a move at the deadline more years than not, but not always. There are years it doesn't happen. I think we're about an hour past the deadline as we record this. Probably nothing happening now. Would have had to have been in the queue for the NBA to approve, and we've heard no rumblings of anything. So I think we ran into a situation here where there were a couple of things going on. One, there was a high asking price for a lot of pieces that teams wanted. So a lot of wing pieces that teams were talking about ended up staying put. Tyreke Evans didn't move. Avery Bradley didn't move as far as we know. Mo Harkless didn't move. So some of those pieces that people really were in the mix for, they didn't seem to want to give up what you had to give up. And maybe that was a first-round pick. Maybe they wanted a young player. Whatever the piece was, teams seemed unwilling to do that. And then the other thing was just that the Thunder's assets aren't great. So if you don't have a great deal of interest in Alex Abrines or Jeremy Grant, there's not a whole lot else. There was at least one report out there that the Thunder was kind of dissuading teams on Terrence Ferguson, wasn't interested in making that happen. And so without that piece, not a whole lot of moving parts the Thunder could work with. And I think that's kind of what ultimately ends up saying, well, you're going to be off the trade deadline and shift your focus maybe to the buyout market.
Well, Barry, and I think some people might think, well, the Thunder had to do something. Are you of the mind that they had to do something here at the trade deadline?
No, I don't believe in trading for trade's sake. Some of the best trades made are the ones not made. So if there was a good one out there, do it, but otherwise not. The truth is, the teams above them didn't do anything. Warriors didn't, Timberwolves didn't, Rockets didn't, Spurs didn't. So really, the whole dang league was mostly dead except for Cleveland, which traded everybody except Drew Carey. So it's a case of, we talked about the limitations on the trade landscape this year, with everybody being sort of strapped for cash. Everybody, the 2016 spending bonanza has everybody in a little bit of dire straits. So everybody's wanting first-round draft picks. Nobody wants to give one. It was not a great market for dealing. So I'm still surprised something wasn't done. But I don't believe in trades for trade's sake. And now the Thunder, I think, moves its attention to the buyout market.
Well, and that brings up the next point, Brett, because the Thunder does have an open available spot. They aren't at the max roster size. And maybe they can be a little more choosy with the buyout market. What's your feeling about whether we'll see them really try to make a move here as guys get bought out?
I think they'll definitely try. I mean, I think that's part of the reason why it is. If not, it might be the reason why they left an open roster spot all this time. They've had one the whole year. That was with an eye on the buyout market. You know that if you have Paul George and Carmelo Anthony, you're going to be an appealing place for some guys to look at when they're bought out. And I also think this is going to be an active buyout market. We don't always see a strong buyout market, but this one looks like it's going to be pretty good. It might not be as good as we think it is right now, but there will be some names. I don't think Derrick Rose is a good fit, but Derrick Rose is a big name. I think Joe Johnson is probably going to get bought out. That's a name maybe that might be interesting. There will be some guys here and there on that market who I think will maybe be a little splashier than your average year.
Yeah, and it is going to be interesting to see what the Thunder might go for. With this being a buyout situation, Barry, they're not having to give away anything. With that open roster spot, will they look for more offense? Will they look for somebody that can help pick up some of that defensive slack? We talked a week or so ago about the fact that around the trade deadline, probably look more, what were you going to do before Andre Robertson got hurt? Okay, do that now. Does that change at all in the buyout market?
Maybe, but probably not. Now, this is going to be a wide generalization, but when you look at the buyout market, it's usually veteran guys, and it's usually older guys. And when you're talking about guys in their 30s, most of them, whatever game they have left, it's usually on the offensive end. They're not usually a lot of great buyout guys on defense. Now, a couple of guys, go against that theory. Joakim Noah, if they want to get into the backup center market. Tony Allen, who doesn't have much left, but can still be a pit bull for 3 or 4 minutes at a time at age 36. But most of the guys, Joe Johnson, Marco Bellinelli, that kind of guy, is more offensive related. So, if Andre was still healthy, they would be looking for offense. He's not, I think, but if you wanted to get any kind of Andre Robertson fill in, it was going to have to come through the trade. Now I think they'll still, if they go buyout, I think it'll still be predominantly offense.
Yeah, you know, and it is going to be interesting to see who comes available, Brett. At this point, we don't know. We're hearing rumblings, you know, somebody may be asking or some teams may be saying they are going to do that. If you had to put a name out there right now, is there a name that you feel like what you're hearing, what you know the Thunder needs, what they could do, is there a name or two you feel like could be most likely in the buyout market?
Well, you know, Barry threw Tony Allen's name out there. That's going to come up, I think. I think Chicago's going to buy him out. I think there was some thought that the Bulls might try to see if there was a move they could make. Whether they would get much back for Tony Allen, I don't think that was ever going to happen. But maybe they could have included him in another trade if they'd wanted to move another player. He could have been a kind of a throw-in guy. Now he's most likely to get bought out. He doesn't make any sense in Chicago. So that's a guy who, if you're looking for a guy to play some spot minutes defensively, he's 36, as Barry said. He's coming off an injury. He is not the Tony Allen that you remember here as kind of giving the Thunder fits in playoff series and many other teams as well. But that's a guy who makes some sense if you're just looking for a guy who you know you can plug in, and he's going to be better defensively in short stretches than an Alex Abrinas is, or really even probably than a Josh Huestis is.
Yeah, and sign me up for Tony Allen. I know, like you guys say, effectiveness limited right now, but a guy that people know from his Oklahoma State days and from his days, making the Thunder's life miserable. This guy, when he wants to, he can really get after it, Barry. And I wouldn't be surprised, especially with a lot of people doubting him late in his career, if he came back to a place that he loved like Oklahoma, you could see him give some pretty decent effort out there, I would think.
Yeah, and now the one thing about Tony Allen, you don't know. I assume he wouldn't sort of infringe upon Thunder chemistry to whatever degree the Thunder's relying on chemistry. But he's a little bit of an oddball personality. I think everybody would agree with that. So you got to factor that in.
Do you have to factor in any fights between he and Russell Westbrook that might happen?
No, although I tell you what, he's the one guy that would look cross-eyed at Russell Westbrook. I promise you, most of us, NBA players and non-NBA players, we don't really want to cross paths with Russell Westbrook. But Tony Allen wouldn't care. So I don't think that'd be a factor. But it's something you got to at least think about. So I think he would be on the list. The truth is, you're not going to find an Andre Robertson. You're not going to find a 6'7" wing who's that fast and that agile and that smart defensively. Those guys just don't exist. The people that say you can go find somebody in the D League like Andre Robertson, no, you can't. You can't find people in the NBA like Andre Robertson, much less the D League. My guess is the Thunder won't try.
That's the thing. You couldn't have found a guy in a trade who did all that stuff. Like, if you'd have gotten Avery Bradley, okay, great. He's a better corner three-point shooter. He's a little better offensive player. He can pester, Steph Curry for a few minutes. If you've got Jonathan Simmons dislodged, that's like a nice player who's a good athlete. There isn't that all-around defender. You could not get him. I understand people saying you need to go out and get something to replace him, but you weren't going to get a one-for-one replacement. Billy Donovan's made this comparison. It's an apt comparison. If you lose a guy who averages 25 points a game, you can't go out and just plug in a 25-point-per-game scorer. Robertson is the same kind of guy defensively. He's not a good offensive player, but you can't replace everything he does. There's nobody out there who could have done that.
Guys, before we get away from the Thunder and what they did not do at the trade deadline, I'm wondering, is the fact that they stood pat, especially with the trade situation, is that more about not having assets, or is that more about liking what you have? Do you feel like one or the other swayed this team into not ultimately pulling the trigger on something?
I think it's more what they didn't have. I think it's more about the other teams. I think if they could have made a move, they'd have made a move. It's been their nature. It's been Sam Presti's MO to go out and get something done at the deadline most of the time. I think if they'd have had a good piece that they were willing to part with, and if there was a really logical wing guy out there, Avery Bradley's the guy everybody points to. I don't know that he's a perfect fit. But if you had the assets to go out and get him, maybe that happens. I think it probably says more about what they have in terms of what they have to give in terms of what people want.
Barry, for so many years, Sam Presti had the biggest toy box of any GM when it came to all these parts. First-round picks, second-round picks, trade exemptions. I mean, just all sorts of stuff that he could cobble together into trades. He doesn't have that now as much. I mean, we still saw him pull some great stuff together this summer, obviously with the Paul George trade, Carmelo Anthony acquisition, but how much is he hampered now? How much of his brilliance is hampered by the fact that he doesn't have that toy box at his disposal anymore?
Well, I mean, he used that toy box to get this roster put together. I mean, The Thunder had some assets this time last year after trading for with Chicago for McDermott and Taj Gibson. But if you trade all your assets, it's not. He didn't get those assets by reaching into into the red dirt of Oklahoma and just pulling them up. He got them from somewhere else.
Right.
And eventually you run out of playing cards. Eventually the deck is empty. And if you get a Paul George and it costs you Sabonis and Oladipo, there's 2 assets gone. If you get a Carmelo and you lose McDermott and Cantor, there's 2 assets gone. First-round draft picks over the years. Cantor cost him a first-round draft pick. He's traded another couple to fortify the roster. So at some point, you're out, and you got to live with what you got, and that's largely where we're at. Plus, like I said, the whole trading outside of Cleveland, nobody was doing it. It was not a massive day of trades. That's because people are short on cap space. They have come to really embrace those first-round draft picks. Everybody wants one. Nobody wants to let one go. That's an impasse on trades. The Thunder would have been one of those teams that if a first-round draft pick is going to be involved, they'd need to get one, not give one. They don't have one to give. Nobody's giving them one, so no trade.
Yeah, two things Barry said there I think are important. One, for all we know, everybody was just on the phone with Cleveland all day, and you couldn't get any calls in because Cleveland was making every deal there was to make. The other thing is, like, when you talk about using up all those assets, and they've moved those pieces as you talked about to get the roster they have now. I think that's part of the reason you're reluctant to deal a guy like Terrence Ferguson at this point. You have so few of those guys left, and Sam Presti's not a guy I think who wants to empty that chamber completely. Guys,
I'm watching NBA Twitter as we're on the air just to make sure, just as we're taping, to make sure nothing's happening. Tim McMahon, who works down in Dallas, just tweeted an interesting name to keep track of, Boras DL, which makes me think about other potential names, maybe not for the Thunder.
I love Boras DL.
I love Boras DL too, and he has made life miserable for the Thunder a time or two. We were talking about Kendrick Perkins in the department earlier today. Is this a situation where maybe there's a name or a guy out there that we're not thinking of that could be a little bit off the beaten path that the Thunder might look at? Or am I just holding out hope for Pert to return?
Well, I certainly didn't. The Joakim Noah thing came up today in a report from Ian Begley of ESPN. I certainly didn't see that one coming. So, sure, there's, that's Thunder trades have been that way, and it's entirely possible that buyouts could go the same way, that there's one guy out there who you're just not thinking about. Like I said, I don't think they're going to go after Derrick Rose. But Noah, I could see you got a Billy Donovan connection there. Every team could use Boras DL, as far as I'm concerned. And he'd be the only guy in the city who likes coffee more than me, so bring him on.
How old's Andre Karolinko? Is he still guarding people? I mean, he was a heck of a defender back in the day. He's not in the league.
That's a name I hadn't thought of for a while.
AK-47.
He might be 47. That's entirely possible.
He might be.
Well, guys, you've mentioned it a couple different times. Let's talk about the Cavs. I know this is Thunder Thursday, but trade deadline day, it was dominated by the Cavs, and it was fast and furious. They got rid of 6 guys, acquired 4. Guys that I didn't hardly know were there are now gone. And these guys come to town next Tuesday, by the way. So if you didn't know who the heck was on the Cavs roster, you get to see them now, here in Oklahoma City. But, Brett, how surprised are you at just the overall moves that this team did?
Yeah, it'll be Cavs Tuesday. Thunder Thursday is now Cavs Tuesday next Tuesday. I was shocked. I was stunned by it. I thought Cleveland would try to make some moves. Certainly, if you watched the game on Wednesday night, LeBron James with the game winner and the utter just ignoring of Isaiah Thomas when he went to celebrate, and Isaiah kind of trying to celebrate with him. It felt like Isaiah Thomas could be on his way out there, but you didn't know if there was a trade that could be made. Isaiah goes to the Lakers in one of the trades that the Cavs made. A big day for them because I think they did some interesting things. They're going to give the Lakers a little room to play with, and we'll talk about that in a minute in terms of salary cap stuff. But they got younger. They got a little more athletic in adding Larry Nance and Jordan Clarkson. I think Rodney Hood is a really good pickup for them, who I think is a great fit next to LeBron. I think Hood will have a really good stretch run, and I think he'll be an important piece for them in the playoffs. They get George Hill. The Ringer's Justin Verrier, a friend of mine, had been sort of campaigning for weeks now. Cleveland just needs to just trade everything that isn't nailed down, that isn't LeBron, and gut your roster on the fly. And that sounded so dramatic, and yet that's exactly what Cleveland did, and I think it's an appealing idea.
It really was stunning. I mean, I think it was the first trade that they did, the one that sent Dwayne Wade out, and that seemed big.
That one came in the middle of it.
Okay, that was the middle trade. Yeah. I mean, everything seemed like the first one. I thought, wow, that's really. And then it just kept going. The cascade, Barry, that the Cavs had today Maybe it was a have to. I don't know. But what do you chalk this up to? Are they just, I mean, is it desperation? Is it, I don't know. What is it?
I think it's desperation because the Cavs have two things going on. One is they've got this season that's disastrous in terms of, the defensive collapse. They're down into third in the East, and it could fall further if they don't stop this slide. And you got all that against the backdrop of LeBron James could bolt this summer. So they're trying to balance. Hey, let's try to win big because you want to win, but also we got to win and show LeBron this is the place to be. So this is a case of blowing up the team for the very best of reasons, which is the team you have stinks, and that it wasn't working. The Kyrie Irving trade has proven to be disastrous. Looked pretty good, eh? You traded an all-star away, but you get a lesser all-star, but an all-star plus a first-round draft pick that's in the lottery. Instead, we saw that Isaiah Thomas is sort of a faux all-star, guy that really can't help you on one side of the ball. Just been a disaster. So they actually made some decent moves. The financial implications are massive. It's going to really hurt Cleveland in the future, but they've frankly been playing for the present for a long time. Now they're coming to Oklahoma City. I think they go to Boston on Sunday, I think, before they come here on Tuesday night. So perhaps LeBron will know everybody's name by then. We'll see. It's going to be fun watching him play with brand new guys. You know, we spent 3-4 months looking at Paul George and Carmelo and the guys getting all to know each other. Cleveland's not going through a training camp to do that. They're going to be playing the Celtics and the Thunder and people like that while they're trying to learn the plays. So it's going to be a mess, but they sort of had to do it just trying to salvage LeBron.
I have to think the Celtics may only try to beat them by about 40, Brett. I mean, I'm sure they'll be kind and maybe just keep it to maybe 30 or so.
I'm just curious, are the Celtics going to, can they email Isaiah Thomas that tribute video? Or how's that going to work? Can they just send it, tweet it at him?
Probably.
Because they had the whole thing queued up for him. Now he's not going to get to see it.
What about, and they went through all that drama with Paul Pierce night, and they're going to do an Isaiah Thomas tribute. It's a mess.
By the way, the Lakers have already gone to Boston, so that's not going to happen. But even if it hadn't, they weren't going to play a tribute video for a Lakers point guard, I promise you.
You know, as you think about this Cavs trade, we'll get to the Lakers. They were actually the first of the Cavs trading partners, and we'll get to that in a second. There were so many, I forgot what happened. But with the Cavs, Brett, as it relates to LeBron, does this give us any indication of what could be with LeBron? I mean, clearly the Cavs are trying to do as much as they can to keep him there. But does this swing things at all in your mind one way or another with him?
I don't think so. There was reporting, I think Brian Windhorst, and I apologize if I'm wrong about who reported it, but somebody reported they did not consult him in terms of, they didn't get a commitment from him. They did talk to him about trades. That's pretty typical. They very much talked to him about the Dwayne Wade trade because Dwayne Wade is his closest friend on the team, one of his closest friends in the league, and they asked him about that and told him it's really going to be up to Dwayne. If he wants to do it, we'd like to send him back. LeBron gave his blessing to that one. I imagine he had input on all these trades, but what they didn't get is any kind of confirmation that he's going to be back. And frankly, given the relationship that LeBron has had to ownership and to that franchise, really over this past season and season plus since they traded Kyrie Irving, certainly, I don't know that you could put much stock into what he told you at this point anyway.
All right, I mentioned the Lakers earlier, and it is an interesting sidelight, Barry. This trade, so much has been made of the Cavs, what the Cavs did, the Cavs. But their part of, the Lakers' part of this trade with the Cavaliers was pretty altering for them as well in terms of cap space. And everybody around here, we're not trying to bury the lead, folks, but everybody around here is obviously aware of what that can mean for Paul George. That seems to me to be a huge aspect of what happened at the trade deadline.
Yeah, well, the Lakers cleared enough cap space that they conceivably could get 2 star players this summer in free agency. They really only had room for 1, and with that mess of a roster, attracting 1 superstar, it was not likely because no star wants to go join that roving band of ruffians. So the Lakers' best case scenario is get 2 at a time. Paul George and LeBron James is their ideal. That would be a nice wing duo. So it was not a great day for Oklahoma City for the Cavs to give that bonus to the Los Angeles Lakers. The Lakers just a few days ago basically had said, virtually they're in punt formation. They're going to worry about the summer of 19. when a lot more cap space opens up and a lot more good free agents are available in 19 as well. That was good news from the Oklahoma City perspective when it comes to Paul George. Now they can be in the running for Paul George. Now it's still a clown show. They still got LeVar Ball there in the shadows. They still got what I would consider sort of a non-contending roster, not even a great future. Their young players have not developed the way that other young players have. It just sort of looks like a sort of a mediocre outfit. Paul George and LeBron James would change that overnight, of course, but we'll see. But it definitely puts the Lakers in a better situation to attract Paul George.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, we don't know anything. I mean, Paul George has said a lot of things about Oklahoma City and about the Thunder and about Russell Westbrook, Brett, that make us think, well, he's not necessarily already, a foot out the door at least. But the Lakers had to have space, and they've now opened that window of opportunity. So they had to do this at some point. Now they're starting to maybe point towards that. What's your best guess about how this might or might not affect things moving forward?
Well, one, it's staggering that they were going to probably get this done anyway. The fact that Cleveland helped them do it is really one of the weirdest subplots of this trade deadline by far. In terms of how it affects things, they would probably have gotten here. They would have probably found a way to get off a couple of those contracts, and now it's just a matter of letting Julius Randle walk. That was probably all going to happen. Now that it's happened, you can sort of talk about it. The thing I would say about Paul George relative to the Lakers is, what month is it now? It's February. Mm-hmm. Nobody's ever said anything meaningful in February about their free agency. It doesn't matter. You'd rather him say that he likes playing with Russell Westbrook than the alternative. You like that there doesn't seem to be any dysfunction in that locker room. Those guys genuinely seem to get along, all three of them, Carmelo Anthony included. But what you say now means nothing. What happens in the playoffs, that will matter. What happens to the Lakers from here on out, what happens with Lonzo Ball's health and what kind of player he is when he gets back, that will matter. Those things are important things that will come into Paul George's decision. The other stuff, the stuff right now, that gets factored in as well, but it gets factored in with all these other things, and we don't know what those other variables are until these playoffs end and the summer actually gets here.
Yeah, and I mean, Barry, I think what you said before is a really interesting point, because there's still a lot about the Lakers that is completely dysfunctional. I mean, they've obviously been a mess for a long time. That may or may not change. But if you had two guys, if a Paul George knew that there would be another great player there, maybe that changes your calculus or your thought process. I don't know. But it seems like they almost had to open it up for two guys. I mean, I don't know if you could entice just one to go.
Not the level of a LeBron or a Paul George, I don't think. And the truth of the matter is, I think Paul George is still better off in Oklahoma City, basketball-wise, than he would be in the Lakers, because he sort of knows what he's got with the Thunder. It's a solid organization. It's going to have a good roster with Adams and Westbrook and the gang, and they're going to be a really good team. And the Lakers, seems like it would work, but you never know. That's been dysfunctional. The truth of the matter is, Paul George might not be making a basketball decision. He may just have meant what he said 2 years ago or 1 year ago when he said, I want to play in Los Angeles. Mm-hmm. He might just want to play in Los Angeles. And if he does, there's not one thing Sam Presti can do about it. I mean, if he wants to play in front of Jack Nicholson and the Laker girls, who cares? Who cares who's on the roster? That's available to him.
By the way, as the Cavs come to town next week, Thursday night, as we speak here in a few hours, Thunder's going to play the Lakers. And our man Eric Horn's out there. He may have to play point guard. We don't know just yet what the options might be there for the Lakers after today. All right, guys, we've gotten all this way, and we still haven't talked about the big win against the Warriors. After a slide, an ugly stretch for the Thunder, they go out to Golden State, Brett, and beat the Warriors. What happened? What changed in a good way? What happened in a good way with that game?
They thundered. It's the thunderous thunder they've thundered all year. They lose at home to the Lakers and look bad, and they go on the road to Golden State and win, because that's what this team does. They played really good defense that night. They were dialed in a way that they had not been in a long time, and where that showed is those rotations behind the closeouts, those rotations behind the guy that followed the ball. That's the stuff that's really been missing since Andre Robertson. And what that shows you is, they can't play that well every night, because Russell Westbrook and Paul George were nuclear offensively that night. But those little things defensively that they've gotten away from lately without Andre Robertson, they can do that stuff. The trick is is to lock in and focus and do it every night. Why don't they do it when they play the Lakers? And why don't they sometimes do it when they play the Wizards or the Kings or whoever else they're playing? That's the big mystery with this team. That's the thing they got to get solved. But what they've shown against the very best teams in the league is that they can do those things. They can lock in defensively. And they're a good team defense when they do that, and we know about their obvious firepower.
Well, and I think the defense, that was everybody's question going into that game, Barry. They were having the worst time guarding the three-point line. And the assumption is, well, you're getting ready to play the team that demolishes you with the three-pointer. What changed? Was it any one guy? Was it collective? What do you put your finger on when you look at just such a vast difference at the three-point line?
Well, a couple things. One is they did get to practice on Monday, and that's actually news because it's their second practice since Andre Robertson went down 10 days ago. Mm-hmm. So as much as we don't like to think about it, even pros need to practice. Even NBA teams need to practice and need to be more than just hear it from a coach. They need to go through it on the court and actually go through some of that stuff. So just practicing helps a little bit. But also, I think at some point they just got tired of taking it so much. A 4-game losing streak in which they were bombarded from the three-point line, the message was starting to finally get through. And Billy Donovan talked about it after the Laker game. That's his biggest concern about this team was three-point defense and getting out and running guys off the line and then worrying about what happens after that. But he said, we're not running guys off the line. And in the NBA, that's what the game has become. If you shoot enough three-pointers and make a decent percentage, you're not going to lose. And that's what teams have been doing to the Thunder. The Thunder, it simply had enough, ran those guys off the line. And now the season, with one game, looks strangely different. Here's literally, I asked this question. Thunder had won eight in a row, and then had a 4-game losing streak, then routs the Warriors in Golden State. To me, that's more optimistic. These last 5 games have been more optimistic than if the Thunder had won 4 in a row to raise their winning streak to 12, and then went out to Oakland and gotten beat 125-105. It's crazy to think you're better off going 1-4 but blasting the Warriors than going 4-1 and being blasted by the Warriors. But the truth is, that's what the NBA is today. It's all about Golden State. They are so big, they're so mighty, they're so good. They've already been anointed the champ. Doesn't matter how many games you win against everybody else, you can't deal with them. But the Thunder now twice has shown, hey, we can play with these guys. Yeah. To me, that gives you more optimism for the season, even though you had that 4-game losing streak.
Well, if 1-4 with a win against them is better than 4-1 without, this is your kind of team because they'll give you that all the time. I'll say another thing that was really important, and I think not undervalued, but in that Golden State game, if I'm in a 7-game series with Golden State, you got to score. I want Carmelo Anthony out there to get me some buckets. But in a one-off situation, Carmelo Anthony gets hurt. Patrick Patterson came in and probably played his best defensive game. I don't think that was a net negative on that night that Carmelo Anthony was limited.
And Steven Adams plays 5 minutes in the first half. Yeah. And they still were up, whatever it was, 13 at halftime.
Patterson, Grant, terrific.
Yeah. Guys, to wrap up, games before the All-Star break, there are 4. We talked about the Lakers tonight, Thursday night, then back home for Memphis. Cleveland, we also talked about next Tuesday, and then at Memphis on Wednesday before the All-Star break. I have no idea what's going to happen. If they continue to play like they did against the Warriors, they may win all these games. Why wouldn't they win all these games? But it seems like getting some positive momentum. Barry, you mentioned playing without Andre Robertson, getting some practice without Andre Robertson. It seems like, I'm not saying you have to win all 4, Brett, but moving in that direction, not just showing up once every 5 games, pretty important for this team.
Yeah, they want to put something together here. They just need to get into a little bit. They need to continue in the rhythm they were in before Robertson got hurt. They probably would have liked to have seen Tyreke Evans get traded just because I think it would have been a signal that Memphis was kind of done for the year in a lot of ways. He didn't. Memphis will be a little bit better than they would have been without him. They've been resting him lately. The Cleveland game is going to be sort of an interesting, I think it'll be a nationally circled game that people will talk about because the Thunder scored 148 the last time. People are going to use this 1-game sample size to talk about whether Cleveland's gotten better. It'll be kind of silly, but we'll do it anyway. But yeah, I think it's important to just kind of ride into the break. Not so much because I think the record is so critical right now. I just think you want to continue to show that you can solve some of these issues that you have with Robertson out.
All right, guys. All-Star break looms, but a lot to go. We'll see if that buyout market starts to have any buyers in Oklahoma City. Sam Presti, we'll see what happens there. We'll have all that, so be sure to stay with the best coverage team anywhere at newsok.com every day in the Oklahoman.